And welcome to the RockerPod Recap. It is day one of the U.S. Figure Skating Championships. Well, day one for me at least. It is not the first day of competition yet. It is the first day of practices, and lots of stuff has been happening. And so I'm going to go over that today. I'm also going to go over a few other things, which is the always sort of hot and heavy what happens with Olympic selections, and there's a lot of questions there, and I'm going to try to answer as many of them as I can. If you are joining me live on YouTube, go ahead and send me any sort of questions that you might have in the chat. I will try to answer them as best as I can while I'm taking a look at those. The other thing that I will say during this live show, and bear with me if there are any technical difficulties, is that I had a chance to talk to Massimo Scali earlier today, and so I'll be playing you that recording of my conversation with Massimo Scali, who is one of Alyssa Liu's coaches, and we talked about uh, the revamped Lady Gaga free skate and the origins of it, and why it happened, right, and what they tried to change over the past few months, and so on and so forth. So lots of stuff to come here. But let me start actually with what happened in practices. There was a fun day of practices. There was not everybody was there today, especially with the men, but the women were here. So the competition this week will go women and pairs on Wednesday, which is tomorrow, men and dance on Thursday, and then back to women and pairs Thursday. Women and pairs on Friday, and then back to men and dance on Saturday. So everybody does get a day off in between. And I was talking to Jean-Luc Baker about this during our ringside practice commentary, and he was like, give me a back-to-back day any day. So it's interesting, right? There are a lot of folks out there who are like, oh, people should have a rest between the short program and the free skate. And there are skaters out there who are like, you know what? I just want to get this over with. I want to get my momentum. I want to do all that kind of stuff. So, this is actually the first U.S. championships I feel like in a long time where we've had a break, a 1 day break for all of the skaters. Usually, I think pairs goes back to back, and maybe dance also goes back to back. But the schedule is very different this year. And a big part of it, and I've talked about this both in our rinkside commentary on U.S. figure skating for the practices and on the podcast, is that, and if you don't know this, don't be surprised when this happens. Nobody will know, well, nobody in quotes, will know who is going to be on the Olympic team until Sunday afternoon. So what is happening this year is there's going to be an Olympics team exhibition, basically, where on Sunday afternoon, I think it's 1 p.m. St. Louis time. Don't quote me on that. It's sometime around there, where they will both announce the Olympic team and also have the exhibition gala of those people on the Olympic team. So, what I have been told is that the announcements will not be made as usual. Usually, what we get is, the women and the pairs end first, and we get to know who the team is, and then the ice dance ends, and we get to know who the team is, and the men finishes, and then we get to know who the team is. That's not going to happen this year, and so there will be nothing official that will be out for the media, for the public, for anybody. I'm very much guessing that there will be unofficial things that people will know, which they can't divulge. And so, yeah, we'll just be on pins and needles for a number of hours. So we'll see what happens. So that's the deal. Let's talk about practices today. So as I was saying, the women were all there, the men were like half there, and so for the men, what was interesting was this the the fight for the 5 spots, or sorry, the fight for the 3 spots for the American men for the Olympic team looks to be among 5 skaters, right? Ilya Malinin, who is basically a shoe-in, Jason Brown, Tomoki Iwatashi, Andrew Torgashev, and Max Naumov. Those 5, right, are the ones who have been doing the best on the senior circuit, all of that sort of stuff. I'm going to talk about the whole selection process later on, so I'm sure you have questions about that and who gets on there. But based on how the quote unquote discretionary criteria is, which is the ultimate thing that they use to choose the folks on the team, those are the 5 who look to be the strongest based on the results from both this season and also late last season. So that's the important thing to know. But out of all of those, it was Jason Brown and Tomoki Iwatashi who were there. Ilya, Andrew, and Max were not at practice today. I did see Max Naumov today around, so he's here. He chose not to do official practice today. Who knows? There might have been an unofficial practice somewhere. But that was kind of who we saw, and I think Jason Brown looked solid but not spectacular. The triple axels were looking better in the warm up than they did in the actual program run through, but that's just also saying he was looking good for a first day practice. We'll see what happens tomorrow and sort of how he improves during the week. Tomoki Iwatashi, I mean, John-Luc and I were looking at each other like the way that he practiced today, if he skated like that this week, it'll be hard to see him not be on the Olympic team. Obviously depends on how everybody else skates as well, but he's got 3 quad toes, right? He's got a quad toe in the short and 2 in the free, and that racks up a lot of points for him. A lot of that sort of just like seeing where he is, I think he's looking very strong right now. So TBD on how Andrew and how Max are going to look, and we'll see them no doubt tomorrow. Other folks that I wanted to mention, I mean, if you have listened to me before talk about the U.S. man, you will know that I am a huge fan of Sam Mindra's skating, and it's so great to just see him skate live. If you have never watched Samuel Mindra skate, you should absolutely do that. He doesn't have quads, he does not have a triple axel, but he has so much to offer in musicality, originality, skating skills, choreography, all of the above. So just kind of a skater in that sense. Lucius Kazanecki looked okay, kind of getting some first day jitters underneath him. I'll talk about how he fits into the Olympic selection process, because he will be part of the selection pool. But kind of again, seeing how all of the criteria, what actually it all means. And then the other person I wanted to talk about, Jimmy Ma was, started off a little bit tight in the warm up and looked a lot better later on. And I think him and Liam Kapakis are 2 of the skaters who probably know that their Olympic spot is a real long shot, but a Four Continents spot is maybe more of a possibility for those 2. So, I think they will be looking to those. So first day of practice for the men was decent. Oh, and Jacob Sanchez also looked very good. Hit a bunch of triple axel, really nice triple toes. Did see him practice a quad sal for the first time. I don't think I've seen him actually do quads in practices before, and so none of them were fully rotated, and he fell on it looked like three pulled in attempts that I saw, but good to see him working on that and eventually putting that into his program, because he's got so much potential. This is a great year for him to kind of set himself up for the next 4 years. So that was the men. For the women, it was, it's going to be a showdown. And Alyssa Liu looked solid. It was a very workmanlike practice, in the sense that it was like literally she went and did 2 of every jump, double axel, triple sal, triple toe, triple loop, and marked her run through. I'll talk about the Gaga program in just a second. Marked her run through. No triple axels, likely not coming this week, but you never know. It's Alyssa Liu. We'll see. And I think if the axle does come, it's probably going to come in the short. But again, we'll see if they decide to take that risk here. It's kind of unnecessary at this point. But Alyssa Liu looking good. Amber Glenn also looking good. I think the thing that's going to continue to be things to watch out for is that triple flip, triple toe combo, which has been giving her just in program and in competition issues this season. She was drilling that. I saw her land looks like 5, 6 of them today. But then she didn't do it in the run through. She did a triple flip. That was a little bit wonky and didn't do the combination on that on the run through. And just was just making sure that she was getting the timing right. And so, I think that will be one where in the short program, when she is doing that triple flip, triple toe, it will show a lot about where her mentality is for this week and how she's going to do. Isabel Loveto looked decent. The run through was like so. But in practice, the triple flip, triple toe was looking okay. I think I saw one that looked fully rotated, a couple of potential unders. I think she is here to get the job done and make it to the Olympics. As we had talked about, Michelle and I talked about in the preview show yesterday that we went live on. The setup based on how everything has been going this season and how everybody's been doing, Alyssa, Amber, Isabeau are by far and away the front runners for the 3 Olympic spots right now, and so they have to get it done, and that's the way they make it to the Olympic team. Whereas Brady Tennell and Sarah Everhart need to skate lights out and hope that some mistakes from others will make the case for them to get on the team. So the stuff that the 3 of Alyssa, Amber, and Isabeau have done so far this season, right? That has been very, really fairly helpful for them. So I got a question about the Gaga free skate. So here are the changes that happen, and I will pass it to Massimo Scali and the interview in just a moment. But if you remember the first version of the free skate at Lombardia Trophy, it was a mashup of I think Bloody Mary and another song that's very similar to Bloody Mary, and I think another song, and then Bad Romance. So it was this sort of like a bit gothy sort of look for her, and it wasn't quite singing at that point, and the program just felt a little bit disjointed. Okay, so it was Bloody Mary. Oh, that's right. Bloody Mary and Disease were the real 2 main parts of the first half, and then it goes to Bad Romance. So that was the first version of the Gaga program. Now, this revamped version really is revamped. The entire first half is different. There's a lot more instrumentation and more sort of like strings and drama that is brought in. So at the beginning, there's a little bit of a teaser of Bad Romance, and then it goes to Paparazzi for a good like minute and a half to 2 minutes. And then there's heavy instrumentation that segues from Paparazzi to the ending Bad Romance that we saw in the Grand Prix final in the exhibition gala. So for me, she marked the jumps there, and we saw some choreography and bits and pieces. For me, the music itself already works 100 times better than the original version, and the program itself felt more coherent, and it felt more like a competitive figure skating program rather than an exhibition program disguised as a competitive program. So it was interesting to see the differences, and just the fact that they literally were going for a similar feel, but the music changes really made a difference. So I'm gonna go and pass it over to Masi Scali, who talked a little bit more about the origins of the program, the kind of how it all worked, and then also the process of transforming it to what it is now. Well, we're in between practices right now, and I'm here with Massimo Scali, world bronze medalist, but also now famed coach and choreographer. Wanted to talk to you a little bit about the Gaga revamp. Let's talk about actually the origins of the Gaga program to begin with. What was the thinking behind it? Why do it the Olympic season? Like, how did you think about that, with her and the team?
So hi Jack and hi everyone. Thanks for having me. So the origin of Gaga was at the start of the season we had a few ideas that were not about Gaga and they were not really exciting us enough. And then one day Alyssa called me and she's like, "Hey, I have this idea. What about Gaga? Can we choreograph on that?" And I'm like, "Of course we can. We can choreograph whatever we want." And it felt genuine, it felt authentic, it felt like she wanted what she wanted to do. Gaga is an artist that she admired from since when she was a little kid. And so it was something that she was extremely excited from the beginning, and so we went for it.
One of the things that I'm always curious about here is how this new version of Alyssa Liu, she comes back, she does two pop songs the first season back, she does two pop songs the second season back. Like how is this different than what you knew of Alyssa from 4 years ago and before that, right? Like how has that changed, and why pop songs?
Well, I think that so what changed compared with when I was working with Alyssa the 2 years leading to the Olympic cycle before this one, is that at that time I was the one proposing and really deciding because she was always like the last call, but I was the one proposing and understanding what was the right thing or the right thing for me in that for these seasons. Now she is in charge of that too. So she is the one that is like, this is what I feel. And it's so important with her because she's not a conventional skater. She is very unique and she defined herself as an artist. And so what is the most important thing for her is to convey what she wants to express. And so pop is her age. I mean, she's 20-year-old and she loves all these like, artists that are giving her emotion. And so that's her way to channel this emotion that she feels when she hears their song, and how she can, represent that on the ice and give that emotion to the public that is watching. So it's authentic, and it's her, and it's like, it's pop. It's like Alyssa.
It's crazy, the transformation from 4 years ago. One other thing that I wanted to talk about was obviously the revamp of the Gaga program. We saw one version at Lombardia Trophy, felt like parts of it clicked, felt like parts of it didn't click. Now we're back with a very different version, right? The only thing that that really stayed the same was the Bad Romance final parts of the program, but even that, the choreography is completely different than before. Tell me about, one, why the change? Like, why did you not stick with the program to begin with? And then two, what was the process behind the whole change, from, Lombardi until now?
So the first Gaga program was an experiment on what she really wanted to represent on the ice. There was the Gaga and her and Alyssa's spooky and dark side, still in a very light way, right? Not extremely dramatic, but we were exploring, and that's why we did Bloody Mary, and that's why the costume and everything had a more like dark and spooky feeling to it. And when we presented the program in Lombardia, sometimes you understand really if things are working when you just put it on the ice and you see them competing. And when we saw it there, we understood that that wasn't the right program, the right vibe, the right costume, the right music. It was just too intense and too dark, even for her. I think that is part of her personality, but it was just too much. And so we changed completely the vibe of the program, and we understood that this program needed to be more about the light and the hope, and the lightness that she always have in anything she does. And so we went with something that was completely different, costume, vibe, music, because Bloody Mary is not there anymore, and we substitute that with Bad Romance, and with Paparazzi, sorry. And we thought that it was, through the building of the program, we thought it was kind of almost funny how this program like naturally became a little bit the story of what she was going through, and so it became very personal again, that it's something that she connects so well with. And also the choice of Paparazzi was very interesting because it kind of reflects the craziness that happened after she won Worlds and how everyone wanted a piece of her. And so we thought that the whole thing made sense with actually what was the authentic story of Alyssa, like in the show, right? It's so successful because it's about her and about her story. And the new Gaga it's very much about that, but very much about no matter how things wanna make could change you, you are authentic to yourself, you still have fun, and it's still gonna be a Bad Romance.
Well, excited to see it this week. Thanks for joining me. Thanks for taking your time, and good luck this week.
Thank you so much.
Well, hopefully you were able to hear most of that. It seems like my connection is not the greatest right now in this room. But that was Massimo Scali talking about all of the changes and everything that happened with the Lady Gaga program for Alyssa Liu. One of the things that he and I talked about after we stopped recording, that it didn't make it into the interview, was that one of the reasons why it actually took so long for them to go from making the decision to change the program at Lombardia to actually getting the program done. I mean, if everybody remembers, right, Alyssa went back to the Donna Summer program from last season and did it for the entire Grand Prix series, and everybody was like, when is Gaga coming back? Is Gaga coming back? What's going to happen? And part of it was just this the re-editing of the whole thing and the instrumentation that they wanted to put into it, and so that took a while for it to kind of gel and come together. And what Masi was also telling me was that the original cuts of the Gaga music. They wanted to use different remixed cuts of it as opposed to the original songs, but because of all the like sort of the copyright rules that the ISU and US figure skating are going by, they ended up needing to use the original Gaga tracks as opposed to the remix tracks that had different beats. So it was they realized when they saw it at Lombardia that it wasn't working and it wasn't fusing, and that was one of the big reasons why they decided to make the change. And the change took a while to actually get together. So they did say that they were hoping to have been able to debut it at Grand Prix final, but it was not ready at that point yet. So that's why we're getting it now. So yeah, hope you enjoyed the little snippet of interview that I had with Masi. I'll be putting that out on the regular podcast as well later in this week. All right, let's talk about Olympic team selection, because this is surely going to continue to be a question this week. So a few things that I want to make sure is clarified for folks, right? There are countries out there, especially Korea and China, who all they do is add up points from different competitions and say, whoever gets the most points, they go. That is not the US selection. There are also countries out there that say, we're going to look at these things, but we're not going to do it in a quantitative way necessarily. It's more of, I mean, it's still quantitative, but it's not like a adding of scores and totals and all that stuff. That's also not the way that the US does it. It is a combination of a number of things, and there's a whole diagram in the selection criteria document that you can go take a look at, just if you want to take a look at it. Actually, you know what? I'm gonna pull this up right now so that you all see it, because I have been staring at this thing for a while. So here we go. 1 second here. Feel like I'm doing a work presentation. I'm gonna share screen. Share. What am I sharing? Sharing this. All right. So this is a selection process diagram. There are a few things that put you into the athlete pool. So this is the sort of like getting your foot in the door part of it, right? So if you are a top 5 athlete or team based on this calculation of overall athlete performance data, and I will get into that in a little bit, which is basically this like adding up of scores. But the scores all have different factors at depending on the weight of their importance and all of that sort of stuff. And the way that it's done, it means that certain people get into the pool that you wouldn't otherwise not expect. And the one person who is sort of an anomaly in this whole thing is Lucius Kazanecki, who has been on the junior circuit the entire season, but because of the way that this calculation of overall athlete performance data is written, the Junior Grand Prix counts as much as the Senior Grand Prix, and the Junior Grand Prix final counts as much as the Senior Grand Prix final. And because he made it to the Junior Grand Prix final, he automatically gets a whole mess of points that puts him actually second in that overall athlete performance data calculation amongst all of the men, because it was only him and Ilya Malinin who qualified for any sort of Grand Prix final, senior or junior. And that made a huge difference in the way that everything got calculated. So I'm going to talk about that in a second. So hold your thought, and if you have any questions, again, let me know. But that's kind of the start of that, right? So there's the top five, and then this thing around athlete and team results from the 2026 U.S. Figure Skating Championships and the most recent World Championships, and a previous Olympic medalist in the same discipline. They really should have just spelled it out because it actually gets spelled out later on in the rules. It's actually saying if you are top five at nationals this year, you're in the pool. If you were top 10 at worlds last year, you're in the pool. If you are a previous Olympic medalist from any Olympics in the previous, cycles, in an individual event, not a team event, in an individual event. So, for example, the Shibutanis, because they won a bronze medal in 2018, they are in the pool. This is just getting your foot in the door. And then anybody who is, I'm going to skip to the fourth one, anybody who's ranked in the top 24 in the ISU World Rankings gets in. So like Jacob Sanchez, he's not part of the top five in performance data right now, and he may not be in the top five at nationals, right? And if none of those things happen, he is still going to be in the pool to be considered because he is ranked in the top 24 in the current world ISU world rankings. So all of that, right? And then there's this other thing that is basically the anybody who's added to the pool by the selection committee based on discretionary criteria. This is kind of like a very sort of Hail Mary thing where it's like there's somebody who did incredibly well over the past year or so who somehow is not top five at nationals, was not top 10 at worlds, did not figure into the top five of the performance data, any of that stuff. That is a rarity, and I frankly can't figure out who would actually be part of this. There's a case to be made if somebody has been injured all season, for example, and none of that kind of happens. But that is not really part of the equation here, I don't think. So I think for all intents and purposes, I would not be looking at that. Out of that, right, that goes into the athlete pool. Anybody who then petitions because of injury or something and they can't skate at nationals, if they get approved, they go into the pool. That's where it starts. You got to get yourself in the pool. But then the pool does not say that like because you are you have 1,800 points in the calculation of overall athlete performance criteria that you get in. Like that is not how that works, right? The whole point of this whole, and I go back to the term body of work because that's the one that really kind of says a lot about how this all works, is the body of work is supposed to tell you how likely a skater is to bring home a medal or to increase the potential for the US to have more medals in figure skating. That is the discretionary criteria that this is talking about. And that is the thing that is incredibly important. And that will ultimately be the thing that leads to the selection of these skaters. And is it correlated with the performance criteria? Absolutely, it's correlated with it. Is it one-to-one correlated? It is not, right? And so just because you've done these things, because the way that the performance criteria additions are added up, right? There are skaters who went to a bunch more internationals or did sectionals or did all that stuff where you wouldn't expect them necessarily to be part of the conversation. They might be, or you wouldn't expect them to have had a as high of a total score, and they do because of the way that the performance data works. So let me again, sort of give you the lay of the land of that. And we're going to share the screen again. All right. And so here's what we got, right? The selection. This is a selection criteria from what we just talked about, and this is how you go into the pool. This bottom part here, where you see the calculation of performance criteria, that is how it's all calculated, and you can do all the math and you will figure out who's going to be in the top 5. But a big part of this is this top one here, which is 2026 Nationals. That, whatever the score is at the end of that, gets multiplied by 4. And so there are people who are going to then move up and move down based on how they score at Nationals. But either way, right, if you're in the top 5 at Nationals, you get into the pool. But all of this is to say, like, you look at something like a junior Grand Prix final. If you make it, you automatically basically get your score times 3 added on to the into your performance data, right? If you keep going down, there's then other international competitions. There's sectionals, there's national qualifying series, which is basically regionals. There's all kinds of stuff. And then what I was saying before is that also then the results from the previous season also factors into this, right? So placement from a previous Olympics or Worlds, the 4 continents from last season, Junior Worlds from last season, Nationals from last season, that all figures into the equation. So lots go into this calculation of performance criteria, performance data, and it is meant to be a way for U.S. figure skating to be able to have as robust of a pool to choose from, and then the committee itself will go into the actual discretionary criteria, right? And I'm going to read this off so that it is very clear what is being said. So the definition of the discretionary criteria to be used is to field the most competitive team. The selection committee will take into consideration the criteria set forth, which includes scores and placements in event, difficulty of the field, performance impact, and head-to-head matchups, to determine the athletes and teams who will have the best chance to win the maximum number of medals at the Olympic Games. So a lot to dissect from that, right? So that is to say, it is not just like, hey, this person did a whole bunch of competitions and they add up to a certain number of points. There's a lot to be said about what they actually scored at those individual competitions. This whole thing around the difficulty of the field that they were competing against is very important, right? The head-to-head matchups is also very important, which is something that I have been stressing during the season. Is whenever there is a U.S. versus U.S. in an international, you gotta look at that, because it gives the selection committee more data to pull from. And so this then goes into this whole body of work piece, right? And the body of work is in the 12-month period from Nationals last year to this Nationals. And so that includes all of the ISU championships from last season, and then all of the fall competitions that we have seen, and it includes last year's Nationals. All of that is so super important. And then there's a whole thing around the technical elements, program components, and total score data derived from protocols after the conclusion of each segment of competition, specifically looking at consistency, competitiveness and trending scores will be a primary focus on discussing the ranking of the athletes and teams and determining the athletes that will have the most performance impact at the games. We saw this for the last two Olympic cycles. We have seen these three sort of categories of criteria: consistency, competitiveness, trending scores. So this is what I was also talking about during the season, right? The way that your scores have built or not built is part of what affects the way that the selection committee is going to look at your body of work, right? If you started off the season really strong and you've sort of faded off since, that matters. If you started your season not so strong, but then you've made a huge improvement, that matters. If you've started your season pretty strongly and you've kept that pretty strongly the entire time, that also matters, right? Like so there's a lot of that is this question of like, are you trending toward the possible highest placements that you will provide for Team USA at the Olympic Games? So all of that leads to what Michelle and I were talking about in the preview the other day, where if you looked at the women, Alyssa, Amber, Isabeau have all of those criteria, right? Like they've got the consistency, they've got the competitiveness, they've got the trending scores. All three of them have been skating very well. And so for someone like a Brady or a Sarah to make it to the team over any of those three, they've got to then show that their scores are trending way up, right? And so that's why it would be important for them. If either of those two are going to make the team, they're going to have to skate incredibly well, versus Amber, Alyssa, and Isabeau need to get it done. There's kind of a difference in the way that the sort of the athletes are seen, and we've seen this before in the past where somebody skates incredibly well at the end of the season but doesn't get on the team because there was somebody else who skated very well during the entire season and just happens to have had a little bit of a blip, right? It can't be a huge blip at nationals. It's still got to be pretty decent. But this body of work thing is very important. And so that's also then going back to the men, why we talk about those five. Ilya, again, like there's just zero chance that he's not going to be on the team. He's this multi-time world champion. He is multi-time national champion. He's got the best scores of the season, all that kind of stuff, right? But then you look at, Jason, who's had the second best set of scores for the season for the U.S. men, and then Tomoki, who's at the third best, and then Torgashev and Naumov, who have the rest of it, and that's you go and look at the consistency and the trending, right? And Andrew Torgashev is one of those who have been trending down, and that was what I was talking about after Finlandia, where I was putting up those arrows because trending is important. And so if he trends back up here and he trends up very well, that makes a difference in the way that the selection committee is going to see him, because he has had a few good skates earlier in the season. Max Naumov, same thing. He had a good skate at Ice Challenge, and it's kind of been up and down for him. But if he goes and skates lights out here, it becomes a very different story. Tomoki, it becomes that's a very different one because he has been consistent all season long. And the thing is, he's got to keep that consistency going here. And so for those three, it's got to be sort of like who's going to prevail out of those three. And for Jason, it's a question of, can he continue to keep it together, right? And that, because he has had the second strongest season of the U.S. men by a little bit, I think he's averaging something like 240, 245 or something like that versus everybody else who's like in more of the 230, 220 range. It changes the way that you look at those different guys. And so someone like Lucius Kazanecki, right? Even though he has the the numbers for these sort of performance data calculations that we're talking about here, the fact is that his average scores have been what 220 220s at the most. That was in at the junior Grand Prix final, and a few others in the sort of low to teen 200s. And so those, right, like even though his scores when you add them all up are much higher and he made the junior Grand Prix final, if you put those scores relative to everybody else in an international level, even if you hypothetically add back a a step sequence in the free skate, right? And maybe you add a quad in the short program, like that it still doesn't compete as well as if you were looking at the other senior men that I was talking about there. So that's where this whole discretionary criteria is going to maybe not throw a wrench in the thing, but it matters how skaters have done during the season and what scores that they have gotten and how well they have placed against a how difficult a field that they were up against. So all of that matters. And so you look at you go and look at the other disciplines, right? There's still the question mark of whether or not Alyssa Efimova is going to get her citizenship this week. I think it's likely low chances, but we will find out. But if we say set aside Alyssa Efimova for a second, right? Cam O'Shea, Shannon Howe, and Shannon Naj have had strong skates this season. Cam and O'Shea are probably maybe a notch above everybody else right now in that selection, but Shannon Howe started off stronger and kind of have been trending a little bit downward. Shannon Naj started off less strong and has been trending up, and so the difference between those two that will be looked at, and then obviously what happens here will be very important to be looked at. And then same thing with the dance. You got to look at Zyngas Kolesnik and their season and how competitive they've been on the international scene as something of a big plus for them. Chalk and Bates are a shoe in for one of the spots, and so it then comes down to then who's the third spot, and looking at how everybody's done this season, you've got to think Carrera, Ponomarenko, and Green and Parsons are probably next up in line. So that's where everything is. Hopefully that was helpful in being able to decipher a little bit of what the selection criteria actually means, and also why it's still not that cut and dry, right? When you take a look at like just the points or just that performance data, criteria data, but it really does have a lot to do with this body of work. And again, those three things around consistency, competitiveness, and the third thing that I can't remember because I'm really tired. So, so that is the primer on the U.S. Olympic selection process, and good luck with staying on pins and needles until Sunday afternoon when we actually get to know who the full team is. All right. That's it for this extended episode of the RockerPod recap for the first practice day. Hope that was helpful again. And tomorrow we will have the first competition. The women's and pairs short programs are coming up, and we will start seeing things happen. And so I will be back tomorrow, and we'll talk to you soon. Bye.